South Africa has downplayed the significance of some key U.S. officials not showing up to the missing from the G20 finance talks in Cape Town. The four-day talks led by the finance ministers and central bank governors of the world's leading economies have concluded without consensus on this, as Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana stressed, and delegates could not agree on issues around climate financing as well as new differences that are said to have emerged.
The G20 finance track meeting ended on Thursday with the issuing of a chair summary that reiterated commitments to global cooperation. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, along with South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago, dealt with the questions on the lack of attendance by some country officials.
From the USA, Scott's visit, the Secretary of Treasury sent a note verbal that he is coming. All of a sudden, the President of the United States called his first budget meeting, his first cabinet meeting yesterday. And therefore, Scott had, as a result, to attend the first meeting.
The heightened attention around the US follows its latest act of hostility towards South Africa by permanently cutting aid. Norwegian ambassador to South Africa, Gjermund Sither, highlighted the strong support South Africa has received for its G20 presidency. He also noted concerns around threats of tariffs on the EU.
As Russia's invasion has already had a severe effect on the European economy, but also on the world economy. So the tariffs and threat of tariffs is not good news. It might have serious consequences for the world economy, so it is a cause of concern, yes.
Meanwhile, on the sidelines of the G20, delegates at the Finance in Common summit discussed ways of addressing the continent's pressing financial needs. The president of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Redge Nkosi, highlighted the importance of the proper use of finances.
Sustainable development depends on, first of all, certainly financing, but more importantly, how this financing is to be used. Effective financing depends on the very good design, design of the projects, and what are the priorities of the sub-Saharan Africa countries in developing their economy.
Civil society groups also had their say.
This is a very important event because we are talking about how to invest for development, social investment, and also for just transition.
But let's expand the conversation. We're joined by Redge Nkosi, who's Executive Director at Firstsource Money, to expand talks. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, the G20 talks South Africa hosted on the global economic issues ended without consensus. I mean, top officials from countries like the US, China, Japan skipped it. How should this absence be interpreted?
It's pretty difficult, but I think for the US, it's easy for us to understand why they skipped it. Because first and foremost, there's some misunderstanding between South Africa and the US in regard to the issues of what President Donald Trump says racism in the land expropriation matters. But I think there's a broader matter here beyond the issues of land that AfriForum and the others have been championing. It is about the stance of South Africa's in the international sphere, especially with regard to Palestine and Israel. I think that has contributed to the US skipping this. With regard to people like China and India and so on, it's perhaps a question of scheduling, but we shouldn't read too much into it until we have a few more meetings to come. But otherwise, I think the G20 is said to be one of the best in the past few years, and we should look forward to a greater cooperation among Africans and indeed Africa with the rest of the world.
With these meetings overshadowed by talks of foreign aid cuts by major economies like the US and Britain against a backdrop of the rising geopolitical tensions, what position does this now place South Africa's plans on how to utilize this platform for, one, putting pressure on the richer countries to give more towards the poorer countries when it comes to transitions to green energy and a reform of the financial system and so forth?
there's certainly need for the international financial architecture to change. It is, in fact, very much biased against the developing countries, and now is the time for this change. This is not a new issue. It has been there. But it seems to me that the way we want it changed is not exactly the way the US and the advanced countries want the global financial architecture changed. So there will always be challenges there. We do not, I think, work from the same pace, from the same page. To the extent that that is the case, there will always be challenges, and our agenda, insofar as we know, will be undermined by the advanced countries, given the fact that they are greater in number, but also they can bulldoze issues through without much consultation at all. So we should expect some challenges there, but not just there, in a few other areas as well. So expect some rough ride, as has been the case in the past G20s, where there has been total consensus.
I'm hoping this line will hold for a little bit longer. It's really not that clear. But there were also talks around the continent's debt. We saw former heads of states gathering, locking minds, trying to find some solutions around addressing the debt issue. How do you think, this sort of absence and some of the loopholes we're seeing here will impact on these leaders trying to find a way out of this debt and solutions that can be put on the table and actually implemented?
Well, I didn't get you right through, but if it is about Africa,
yes,
and the solutions that need to be found in regard to matters, say, of debt and others, then quite frankly, that is a story that's not going to change in the coming years, because what we want from our side as Africa and South Africa is that much of the debt solutions that are given by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, they do not actually support what we think should be supported. And as such, divisions between the developing countries, especially those in Africa and the rest of the world, are going to remain.
As the groundwork gets underway, what are your expectations insofar as the presentations that will actually be made in a couple of months' time?
Well, firstly, there has to be input from quite a number of quarters, from the academia, from business, from civil society, and so on. All these issues have to come together, and given, of course, to the leadership of the G20, one hopes the outcomes will be positive, given that Africa is hosting this for the first time. And therefore, we think our issues are going to be taken seriously, and looking forward to cooperation with advanced countries on the major issues that affect Africa, especially debt, and growth, economic growth, and financial sector, and other related sectors like the climate change or climate finance, if you want. These are key issues which I think must pan out quite properly, even if we're seeing some challenges from the US, given the orders that President Trump has put in place. Overall, we see the outcome being positive, given the fact that Africa has got a stronger voice now than before.
Yeah, and of course the climate change talks are of high significance and, are set to feature very dominantly throughout these talks. What positions should South Africa or the continent, what approach should the continent be taking as, we look at the impact, the ripple effects? I mean, as you and I speak, KwaZulu-Natal has been battered and, it's catastrophe after catastrophe when it comes to the bigger impact of climate change, lives being lost.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt climate change is with us here, and I think every single contribution that is expected to come out of here must necessarily be very, very serious. Africa or the developing world are expected to be buffeted by a great deal of changes in the climate, and we need finance for that, but also just other assistance, if you want. Not that we should always look forward to advanced countries to assist us, but we should also be able to create our own solutions to this. Nonetheless, it's a global matter. It's not a South African matter. It's not an African matter. It's not a developing world matter. It's a global effort. For that to change, we have to seriously cooperate and help each other in terms of financing, in terms of sciences related to that, and other matters connected to climate change. But as of now, we see differences emerging from, between us in the developing world and especially the US. But also some differences even among the countries that agree, differences in terms of how to finance climate change. To the extent that these these differences are there, I'm afraid we're not going to have a good consensus going forward, and therefore the disadvantages Africa faces, or the developing world face, will continue to be present.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for weighing in this discussion. We're going to have to leave it there. We do apologize for the quality of that line. Redge Nkosi, Executive Director at Firstsource Money, expanding on the G20 talks that South Africa has hosted on the global economic issues.